Welcome to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. This is a podcast for faithful women who want healing in their relationships, guidance from God, and internal peace. Each week, you'll hear mental health concepts taught through a spiritual lens from me, a licensed clinical mental health counselor, to help you start thinking in a higher and holier way. Welcome. On this episode, we will be discussing navigating interactions with someone who has narcissistic traits. All right, we're going to be talking about kind of a buzzword or topic today by discussing narcissism. It seems to be a term that gets thrown around and might not always be accurate, which is one of the reasons I'm using the term traits instead of someone with narcissism. There's an important distinction between having traits of narcissism and being diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. Not everyone who exhibits narcissistic behaviors meets the clinical criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. When I was in my master's program to become a therapist, one of the cautions they gave us was to be careful to not diagnose yourself with everything you study. The reason for this was because there is a spectrum of behavior. Narcissistic tendencies or traits can show up in people without them having a full-blown personality disorder. For example, someone might exhibit behaviors like seeking excessive attention or lacking empathy in certain situations, but still function well in their relationships and other areas of their life. Also, labeling someone as a quote-unquote narcissist outright can really oversimplify their behavior or feel dismissive. People are more complex than a single label. And it's possible that someone's narcissistic tendencies stem from other issues like insecurity or even trauma. But the truth is, engaging with someone who exhibits narcissistic traits, even without a diagnosis, can be emotionally challenging and at times exhausting. Interacting with someone with narcissistic traits might include behaviors like inflating their own accomplishments to gain praise, or ignoring other people's feelings and deliberately taking credit for someone else's work. It can also look like a person focusing on their own wants and needs at the expense of others, or expecting a lot from others but giving little in return, or even believing that they're superior to their partner. When interacting with someone with these traits, it's important to set healthy boundaries and manage your emotional energy. I'm going to be giving you 3 different ways that you can do that, but I want to first address something that gets brought up frequently when I'm working with someone that is in a relationship like this or interacting with someone who has these traits. And it's the concept of being quote unquote long-suffering or loving your enemies or blessing those that curse you, or being a peacemaker. While we do want to be Christlike in all situations, we are not asked to put ourselves in unhealthy situations and allow others to hurt us. Even President Nelson talked about this in his General Conference talk, Peacemakers Needed. He said, "Now, I'm not talking about peace at any price. I'm talking about treating others in ways that are consistent with keeping the covenant you make when you partake of the sacrament. You covenant to always remember the Savior. In situations that are highly charged and filled with contention, I invite you to remember Jesus Christ. Pray to have his courage and wisdom and to say or do what he would. As we follow the Prince of Peace, we will become his peacemakers." The Savior is the one person that knows what is needed for both people involved in the situation. The Savior is the one person that can help you have courage to do hard things in relationships, like set boundaries and know when and how to set them. Including the Savior in the process is vital. Also, remember that boundaries are not to change another person's behaviors. I recorded an episode on boundaries last year that you should check out if you want to learn more about boundaries. One thing I addressed in that episode is that individuals who need boundaries set are most likely the people who often push limits, or either intentionally or unintentionally. And this helps them maintain control or fulfill their needs for attention and validation. So setting a boundary that they push back on doesn't mean it's the wrong one. Okay, let's dive into some tips for navigating interactions with someone who has narcissistic tendencies. The first tip is to avoid engaging in power struggles. Many people with narcissistic traits thrive on dominance and control within interactions. They may initiate debates, shift blame, or escalate conversations to provoke a reaction. Engaging in power struggles can be emotionally draining and is unlikely to result in resolution or mutual understanding. In order to avoid power struggles, you will need to pick your battles and remember that not every issue needs to be addressed or argued. Stay focused on what truly matters and let go of those minor disagreements that won't lead to constructive outcomes. You can do this by using neutral language. Emotional or confrontational language often fuels a narcissistic individual's desire to win. Instead, use neutral phrases such as, "I see where you're coming from," or "let's revisit this later." This can be a simple way to be a peacemaker in a situation by avoiding power struggles. And when you avoid these power struggles, you really save yourself energy for more meaningful interactions. When you do this, it minimizes opportunities for manipulation and keeps the focus on maintaining a peaceful, balanced relationship. A second tip for navigating interactions with someone who has narcissistic tendencies is to recognize the other person's need for validation while also prioritizing yourself. Narcissistic individuals often have an insatiable need for validation and attention. While it's tempting to either feed their ego or refuse to engage altogether, a more balanced approach involves acknowledging their perspective without compromising your own needs. And you can do this by showing acknowledgement, not agreement. You can validate their feelings or perspective without necessarily agreeing with them. For example, you can say, "I understand you feel strongly about this," instead of "you're absolutely right? We don't need to go that direction. You can also set time limits. If the conversation revolves entirely around their needs, consider setting a time limit or gently redirecting the focus. For instance, "I'd love to hear more about this, but I need to address something else first." Acknowledging their need for validation can help diffuse tension and help have smoother communication. At the same time, maintaining a focus on your own needs ensures you don't lose yourself in the relationship. Striking this balance is really key in preserving both the relationship and your personal boundaries. Okay, now for tip number 3, which is to manage expectations and accept limitations. When interacting with someone who exhibits narcissistic traits, it's important to recognize their limitations and adjust your expectations accordingly. Narcissistic individuals often lack self-awareness. They struggle with empathy and may not respond to emotional cues in the way that you hope. Accepting these realities can help you avoid unnecessary frustration and disappointment. You can do this by being realistic. Understand that you may not receive the emotional support or validation you would expect from someone with narcissistic tendencies. For example, they may struggle to prioritize your feelings or recognize their impact on you. Remember, you can maintain a functional relationship, but expecting deep emotional intimacy may not be realistic. They often focus on themselves rather than mutual connection. Instead, you can focus on what you can control. You can't change their personality or behavior, but you can control how you respond. For instance, rather than expecting them to admit fault, focus on resolving the issue independently or just stepping back from the conflict. By managing your expectations and accepting your limitations, you free yourself from emotional burden of trying to quote unquote fix them or make the relationship something it really can't be. This mindset also allows you to interact with them on terms that feel less frustrating or more manageable. Managing interactions with someone who has narcissistic traits requires a combination of patience, self-awareness, and emotional resilience. Setting boundaries and avoiding power struggles, balancing validation with self-care, and being realistic are not always easy tasks, and you might need some support yourself when you're doing these things. Prioritize your mental health and well-being in the process might mean seeking professional support or creating distance from that person for your own peace of mind. I'm a big believer in fortifying your mental health for future challenges that you might have. If that's that's one of the reasons I created the LDS Mental Health Skills Deck. This skills deck comes with 52 skills to help you maintain your own emotional regulation while dealing with difficult people. If you want to check it out, I'll put the link in the show notes and you can learn more about that skills deck. But hopefully these tips were helpful for you. If they are, please reach out to me and let me know on social media, shoot me an email, or the best thing you can do is share this episode with others and let them know it was helpful for you. All right, I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. I hope you were able to find ways of healing, guidance, and peace. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend who would love to start thinking in a higher and holier way as well. Or hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. Also, check out the links in my show notes for other episodes you might like and links for other mental health resources on my website.